The great council chamber buzzed with hundreds of different voices speaking in dozens of languages. Tall beings with blue skin chatted with short, furry creatures while floating jellyfish-like aliens drifted between the seats. The massive dome above them showed the stars of the galaxy, each one representing a world that belonged to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in her designated seat, a simple metal chair that looked plain next to the elaborate thrones and floating platforms used by other species. She wore a basic gray uniform with small Earth symbols on the shoulders. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she held a simple tablet in her hands. Around her, the other human delegates looked just as ordinary. They had no special armor, no glowing eyes, no sharp claws or fangs. Their skin was soft and pink, their teeth were flat and white. And they moved slowly compared to the quick, graceful aliens around them. "Look at them," whispered Korth, a tall reptilian being from the Zephyrian Empire. His long snout was filled with razor-sharp teeth, and his scales gleamed under the chamber lights. How did such weak creatures ever reach the stars? His companion, a muscular Krathan warrior with 4 arms and natural bone armor, laughed quietly. "I heard they still eat plants and small animals on their world, like children playing at being hunters." Near them, a graceful Velkari delegate floated past on 6 legs, her silver eyes glowing with amusement. "They are so slow to react to everything. Watch how long it takes them to understand even simple jokes." The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years now. They had joined as eager explorers, bringing gifts of art and music from their small blue world. Every species remembered the day they arrived, so excited to meet other intelligent life, so grateful to be accepted. Since then, humans had become known as the galaxy's best mediators. When 2 species had trade disputes, they called for human negotiators. When there were cultural misunderstandings, human diplomats would spend months learning both sides of the problem and finding solutions that made everyone happy. They were helpful, friendly, and completely harmless. Sarah Chen looked up from her tablet as the great gong sounded. The chamber's noise died down as thousands of beings turned their attention to the central platform. Council Speaker Threnx, a massive being that looked like a walking tree with golden bark, raised one of his many branch-like arms. "Honored delegates," Threnx's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers, automatically translated into every language present. "We gather today for the quarterly Peace Summit. As always, we celebrate another season of prosperity and cooperation among our member worlds." Polite applause filled the air. Some species clapped their hands. Others clicked claws and a few made musical tones. "Today's main business concerns the integration of a newly contacted species into our galactic community," Threnx continued. "I am pleased to present the delegation from the Yilani Collective." The chamber's main doors opened with a soft hiss. A group of tall plant-like beings entered slowly. They looked like walking trees with smooth green bark and leaves growing from their arms and heads. Their faces were almost human-like, with large black eyes and small mouths. They moved gracefully, their root-like feet making no sound on the polished floor. Sarah watched them approach with the same polite interest she showed all new species. The Yilani looked peaceful and gentle. Their leader, a particularly tall individual with golden leaves, carried what appeared to be a gift, a small potted plant with beautiful blue flowers. "We welcome you, children of distant stars," Threnx said formally as the Yilani reached the center platform. "Please tell us of your world and your people." The lead Yilani stepped forward and began to speak. His voice was soft and musical like wind through leaves. The chamber's translation system immediately converted his words into every known language. "Honored council members," the alien said, bowing slightly. "We are the Yilani, gardeners of the world we call Growth Home. We have tended our gardens for thousands of your years, cultivating beauty and harmony." Sarah nodded along with the other delegates. Another peaceful agricultural species. The galaxy was full of them. Most intelligent life seemed to develop along gentle lines once they reached the stars. "Our world is vast and green," the Yilani continued. "We have learned to work with nature rather than against it. We harvest only what we need, and we always plant more than we take." The human delegation smiled. These aliens sounded like ideal galactic citizens. "We have many gardens across our world," the speaker went on, "each one carefully planned and maintained. We take great pride in our seasonal collections, gathering the finest fruits when they are perfectly ripe. Sarah made notes on her tablet. The Yilani would probably want to trade agricultural products and gardening techniques. Humans could offer earth plants in exchange for alien crops. It would be a simple, beneficial relationship. We have expanded our gardens to many islands across our world's great ocean, the Yilani said. Each island offers different growing conditions, different opportunities for cultivation. We have found 17 particularly productive locations. The alien activated a holographic display above the platform. Images of a beautiful world appeared. Vast green forests, crystal-clear oceans, and carefully maintained gardens stretching to the horizon. The gardens were filled with colorful plants and what looked like decorative sculptures scattered throughout. Sarah squinted at the images. Something about those sculptures seemed odd, but she couldn't quite place what bothered her about them. We hope to share our knowledge of cultivation with the galaxy, the Yilani concluded, and perhaps learn new techniques from other gardening species. Gentle applause filled the chamber. Several agricultural worlds sent signals indicating their interest in trade discussions. The Velkari delegate even complimented the beauty of the Yilani's holographic gardens. Sarah continued taking notes, but her eyes kept returning to those strange sculptures in the garden images. They were white and seemed to be arranged in deliberate patterns. Some were small, others much larger. They almost looked like. She shook her head. It was probably just alien art that her human brain couldn't understand properly. Every species had different ideas about beauty and decoration. Around the chamber, other delegates were already discussing trade possibilities with their neighbors. The Zephyrians wanted to know about the Yilani's farming tools. The Krathan were interested in their soil enhancement techniques. The humans sat quietly, waiting their turn to speak. As always, they would offer friendship and cooperation. They would volunteer to help with translation services and cultural education. They would make sure the Yilani felt welcome in their new galactic community. It was what humans did best, helping others, building bridges between different worlds and cultures. They had no advanced weapons to offer, no superior technology to trade. All they had was their endless patience and their genuine desire to help everyone get along. Sarah looked up at the stars showing through the dome above them. 15 years ago, humans had looked at those same stars from Earth and dreamed of joining the galactic community. Now they were here, trusted mediators in a galaxy full of wonders. She smiled slightly and turned her attention back to the Yilani delegation, ready to begin another routine diplomatic process. Just another peaceful day in the Galactic Council, with another gentle species joining their community of civilized worlds. The sculptures in the garden images didn't seem important anymore. The Yilani representative continued his presentation, his leaf-covered arms moving gracefully as he spoke about their peaceful world. The translation system converted his musical voice into pleasant words about farming and gardening. Our cultivation methods have been refined over many generations, he said, the holographic images shifting to show different areas of their world. We have learned to identify the best specimens for harvest at precisely the right moment. Sarah Chen continued taking notes, but something nagged at the back of her mind. She had stopped looking at her tablet and was watching the alien's gestures more carefully. There was something about the way he moved his arms when he talked about harvesting that seemed wrong. We take great care in our selection process, the Yilani went on. Young specimens are often the most tender, though mature ones can provide more substantial yields. Around the chamber, other delegates nodded approvingly. Agricultural expertise was always valued in the galaxy. The Krathan delegate was even recording the presentation to share with his world's farming colonies. But Sarah's attention was fixed on the Yilani's body language. As a human diplomat, she had spent years learning to read nonverbal communication from dozens of different species. It was one of the few advantages humans had in galactic politics, their ability to notice small details that others missed. The way the Yilani's arms moved when he said, "tender," didn't match how farmers usually talked about crops. It was the gesture predators made when discussing prey. Sarah felt her breathing change slightly. Her heart rate increased just a fraction. These were automatic responses she couldn't control, ancient human instincts that had kept her species alive for millions of years. The process requires patience, the alien continued. We watch our targets carefully, learning their habits and weaknesses. When the time is right, we move quickly to complete the harvest before they can escape to warn others. The translation made it sound like he was talking about picking fruit. But Sarah's enhanced pattern recognition was telling her something else entirely. Crops didn't escape, fruits didn't warn others. She glanced at the other humans in the delegation. They had all stopped taking notes. Every single human in the chamber had gone very still. Their eyes focused on the Yilani speaker with sudden intensity. Dr. James Wright, the human xenobiologist, had tilted his head slightly to one side. Sarah recognized the gesture. It was what humans did when they were analyzing potential threats. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, their security chief, had shifted her weight forward in her chair. Her hands were resting casually on her knees, but Sarah could see the tension in her fingers. The other species in the chamber noticed nothing unusual. They continued listening politely as the Yilani described their gardening techniques. "Our most successful gardens have been on the smaller islands," the alien said, manipulating the holographic display. "Isolated locations where the specimens cannot escape to other areas. We have achieved complete harvests on 17 different islands." Sarah's blood went cold. She looked more carefully at the holographic images, focusing on those white sculptures scattered throughout the gardens. Now that she was really paying attention, she could see what they actually were. Bones arranged in careful patterns like trophies, some small enough to belong to children. "The seasonal collections are our greatest pride," the Yilani continued. "We plan them carefully, ensuring that no specimen escapes. We have found that fear improves the quality of the final harvest, so we prefer to take our time with the process." Sarah's hands had started to shake slightly. She forced herself to remain calm, but her human brain was rapidly putting together patterns that the translation system was hiding. The Yilani weren't farmers at all. They were predators. Worse than predators, they were systematic exterminators. "We have learned to identify the most vulnerable groups," the alien said proudly. "Young civilizations that have not yet developed proper defenses. Species that trust easily. We approach them as friends, offering gifts and trade until we understand their weaknesses completely." The chamber erupted in gentle applause. The other delegates thought they were hearing about advanced agricultural planning. The translation system was converting descriptions of genocide into farming metaphors. But every human in the chamber was now sitting perfectly still, their breathing controlled, their eyes locked onto the Yilani speaker. To anyone who knew what to look for, they looked like predators that had just identified a threat to their pack. Sarah slowly reached for her tablet and began accessing the chamber's computer system. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, calling up files that most delegates never bothered to check. Missing ship reports, lost colony communications, unexplained disappearances in deep space. "Our latest project involves 3 particularly promising areas," the Yilani was saying. "We have made contact with the inhabitants and are currently studying their behavior patterns. Soon we will begin the final harvest phase." Sarah cross-referenced the coordinates the alien had mentioned with recent human exploration reports. Her blood turned to ice as the matches came up on her screen. 3 human colony ships had gone missing in that exact region over the past 10 years. Ships carrying families, children, scientists, artists, peaceful explorers looking for new homes among the stars. The Yilani had been hunting them. Sarah stood up slowly. Around the chamber, every other human rose with her in perfect synchronization. The movement was so smooth and coordinated that it looked choreographed, but it wasn't planned. It was instinct. The other delegates finally began to notice that something was wrong. The humans had never interrupted a presentation before. They always waited politely for their turn to speak, always followed proper diplomatic protocol. But now they were all standing, and there was something different about them. Something that made the nearby aliens feel suddenly uncomfortable without understanding why. Sarah walked down the steps toward the central platform. Her movement was fluid and purposeful, like a hunting cat approaching its prey. The Yilani speaker noticed her approach and paused in his presentation, looking confused. "Ambassador Chen," Speaker Thrank said uncertainly, "do you have a question for our new friends?" Sarah reached the platform and looked up at the Yilani representative. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly calm and controlled. "Computer," she said clearly. "End translation filters. Raw linguistic analysis only." "I don't understand," the Yilani said, his musical voice now carrying a note of concern. "Continue your presentation," Sarah replied, her eyes never leaving his face. "Tell us more about your harvesting methods." The alien looked around the chamber nervously, sensing that something had changed but not understanding what. He resumed speaking in his own language, the same melodic tones as before. But now the chamber heard what he was actually saying. The horror of the real words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The Yelani wasn't talking about plants at all. He was describing in detail how his species hunted and consumed sentient beings. He was bragging about the systematic extermination of entire civilizations. He was explaining how they preferred to torture their victims before killing them, because fear made the meat taste better. The chamber erupted in screams and shouts of outrage. Delegates jumped from their seats, some fleeing toward the exits, others demanding immediate action. But through all the chaos, the humans remained perfectly silent and perfectly still. They were all looking at the Yelani with the same expression. The cold, calculating stare of apex predators that had just marked their prey. The chamber filled with chaos as hundreds of delegates realized what they had just heard. The Velkari representative was making high-pitched whistling sounds of distress. Several Krathan warriors had drawn their ceremonial weapons, though they seemed unsure what to do with them. The massive Thranx was trying to restore order, his booming voice calling for calm. But through all the noise and panic, the humans remained silent. Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the platform, her eyes fixed on the Yelani representative who was now backing away in confusion. Around the chamber, every human had gone completely motionless. They weren't shouting or running like the other species. They weren't drawing weapons or demanding justice, they were thinking. Dr. James Wright was still in his seat, but his hands were moving quickly across his tablet, accessing databases and cross-referencing information. Captain Rodriguez had shifted her position so she could see all the exits while keeping the Yelani in her line of sight. The human translator, Maria Santos, was listening to communications channels that most delegates didn't even know existed. To the other species, the humans looked eerily calm. But if anyone had known what to look for, they would have seen something far more disturbing. The humans were coordinating without speaking, using tiny gestures and eye movements to share information. They were positioning themselves strategically around the chamber. They were hunting. "Please," the Yelani representative said through the now accurate translator, his voice high with panic. "There has been some mistake. We are peaceful gardeners. We cultivate plants, not what you think." Sarah walked closer to him, her movement smooth and deliberate. Other delegates unconsciously stepped back, giving her room. Something about the way she moved triggered deep survival instincts in every species present. "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice so quiet that the chamber's audio system had to amplify it for everyone to hear. "How many what?" the alien replied, pressing himself against the holographic display controls. "How many species have you completely eliminated?" The Yelani's large black eyes darted around the chamber, looking for support or escape routes. He found neither. We don't eliminate anyone. We are farmers, Computer," Sarah interrupted. "Display the holographic images again. Enhanced resolution. Focus on the white structures in the gardens." The display flickered and the images reappeared, but now with perfect clarity. What had looked like decorative sculptures before were now obviously skeletal remains. Hundreds of them, thousands, arranged in neat rows like planted crops. The chamber fell silent except for a few horrified gasps. Sarah pointed to a cluster of smaller bones. "Those are children," she said matter-of-factly. "Different species, but all young. You hunt the children first, don't you? They're easier to catch." No, you don't understand. 17 species," Sarah continued, her voice still terrifyingly calm. "You said 17 successful harvests. That means 17 intelligent species that no longer exist because you ate them all." The Yelani was shaking now, his leaves rustling with fear. Around the chamber, other delegates were beginning to understand the full scope of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just murder or even war. This was systematic genocide carried out for food. Dr. Wright stood up from his seat and walked down to join Sarah. His tablet was still in his hands, displaying streams of data. "I've been checking our missing ship's database," he said conversationally. 3 human colony vessels disappeared in your territory over the past decade. The Harmony, the New Dawn, and the Hope's Journey. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The Harmony was carrying 412 people. Dr. Wright continued in the same casual tone. "Families, mostly." scientists and teachers looking to start a new settlement, 67 children under the age of 10. Captain Rodriguez had also moved down to the platform, approaching from the other side. She wasn't hurrying, but her path would cut off the Yelani's escape route to the main doors. The New Dawn had 308 colonists, Wright went on, agricultural specialists. They were excited about the possibility of meeting peaceful farming cultures like yourselves. 31 children. The alien's breathing had become rapid and shallow. His eyes kept moving between the three humans. But he was beginning to understand that there was nowhere to run. The Hope's journey, Wright said, his voice still perfectly controlled, was a refugee ship. Survivors from a natural disaster on one of our outer colonies. They were looking for a safe place to rebuild their lives. 294 people. 88 children. Sarah took another step closer to the Yelani. Over 1,000 humans, she said quietly, including 200 children. You hunted them. You killed them. You ate them. It wasn't personal, the alien stammered. It's just survival. It's nature. The strong consume the weak. You must understand nature, Sarah repeated. Around the chamber, the other human delegates had begun moving. Not running, not charging, but walking with purpose toward predetermined positions. They were spreading out to cover every exit, every communication station, every control panel in the vast chamber. The alien species that had mocked humanity's lack of natural weapons were suddenly remembering something they had forgotten. Humans were predators. They had evolved from pack hunters that could run down prey across vast distances. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain not with claws or fangs, but with patience, coordination, and ruthless intelligence. You want to talk about nature? Sarah asked, still speaking quietly. Let me tell you about human nature. She gestured to the other humans around the chamber. Every one of them was now in position, forming a perfect perimeter. Not one of them had drawn a weapon or made a threatening move. But every delegate in the chamber could feel the trap closing. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Sarah explained, her voice taking on the tone of a patient teacher. Do you know what that means? It means we don't give up, ever. We pick a target and we follow it until it dies of exhaustion. The Yelani was looking around frantically now, realizing that the humans had somehow surrounded the entire chamber without anyone noticing. We also evolved as cooperative hunters, Sarah continued. We work together. We plan together. We share information instantly and seamlessly. When you threaten one human, you threaten all humans. Dr. Wright had pulled up a new display on his tablet. I've been accessing our deep space monitoring network, he said conversationally. It seems we've been tracking your ships for quite some time. We know where your homeworld is. We know where your colonies are. We know where your hunting fleets are currently operating. Captain Rodriguez spoke for the first time. We also know where you're keeping the prisoners from your current projects. The chamber had gone completely silent. Every delegate was staring at the humans, suddenly seeing them in an entirely new light. These weren't the soft, harmless diplomats they had known for 15 years. These were apex predators who had been hiding their true nature behind smiles and helpful gestures. But here's the thing about human nature that you really need to understand, Sarah said. Taking one final step toward the terrified alien, we protect our young. Not just human young, all young. It's hardwired into us. We can't turn it off. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. You hunt children. You kill children. You eat children. Her voice remained calm, but there was something in her eyes that made the Yelani whimper in terror. That makes you a threat to every young thing in the galaxy. Sarah smiled then, and it was the most frightening expression anyone in the chamber had ever seen. And humans are very, very good at eliminating threats. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the usual background hum of the environmental system seemed muted. Every delegate, every staff member, every guard was staring at the humans with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the trembling Yelani representative. But her stillness wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the motionless concentration of a predator that had marked its prey and was calculating the perfect moment to strike. Computer, she said without breaking eye contact with the alien, open a priority channel to Earth Defense Command. The chamber's main display flickered and a new face appeared. Admiral Elena Chen, Sarah's older sister. The family resemblance was clear, but where Sarah looked like a diplomat, the Admiral looked like exactly what she was, a military commander who had spent decades preparing for threats to humanity. "Hello, Sarah," the admiral said calmly. "I was wondering when you'd call." The delegates exchanged nervous glances. How was the human military already connected and ready? "We have a code black situation, Elena," Sarah said, still not moving from her position near the Yelani. "Confirmed genocide of human civilians. Multiple colony ships, children included." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold and terrible entered her eyes. "Understood. How many hostiles?" Dr. Wright stepped forward with his tablet. "Initial estimates suggest 17 confirmed genocides. Current active hunting operations in 3 sectors. Unknown total population, but satellite imaging indicates major population centers on 12 worlds." "Threat assessment?" the admiral asked. Captain Rodriguez answered. "Systematically targets developing civilizations. Prefers isolated populations. Uses deception to approach victims. Confirmed consumption of sentient young." The admiral nodded slowly. "That's all I need to hear." "Operation Extermination is authorized." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The other species had never heard humans use such language before. Military operations were supposed to be defensive, protective, peacekeeping. The word extermination belonged to the vocabulary of conquerors and genocidal maniacs. But the humans were speaking about it as casually as discussing the weather. "Fleet status?" Sarah asked. "Already moving," Admiral Chen replied. "Funny thing about serving as galactic mediators for 15 years. You end up with very detailed maps of every system, every trade route, every communication relay in the galaxy." The display split to show a tactical overview of local space. Hundreds of red dots were moving across the star map, converging on the region where the Yelani homeworld was located. "Wait," gasped Speaker Thranks, finally finding his voice. "You're mobilizing a military fleet? This should be brought before the full council for debate and decision." Sarah turned to look at him, and the ancient tree-like being actually stepped back. There was something in her expression that spoke to instincts far older than civilization. "This isn't a council matter," she said quietly. "This is a human matter. The Yelani killed our children. That makes them our problem to solve." "But surely there must be a trial, an investigation," began the Velkari delegate. "We've already investigated," Dr. Wright said, holding up his tablet. 15 years of investigations, actually. Every missing ship, every lost colony, every unexplained disappearance in this sector of the galaxy. We've been tracking patterns that everyone else ignored. The Krathan military representative, a 4-armed warrior covered in natural armor, spoke up. "You cannot simply declare war on an entire species without council approval." Captain Rodriguez looked at him with something that might have been amusement. "We're not declaring war. War is between equals. This is pest control." "Besides," Sarah added, "we learned long ago not to ask permission for things we're going to do anyway." The chamber's displays lit up with new information streams. Military communications, fleet movements, strategic analyses, all flowing past faster than most delegates could follow. But the pattern was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't just been sending diplomats and mediators throughout the galaxy for 15 years. They had been placing assets. Military observers disguised as cultural attachés. Intelligence operatives working as trade negotiators. Reconnaissance specialists serving as scientific advisors. Every major world, every strategic system, every important installation in the galaxy had humans stationed nearby. What the other species had seen as naive enthusiasm for cultural exchange had actually been the systematic infiltration of the entire galactic community. "How long have you been planning this?" whispered the Zephyrian delegate. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We've been planning for every possibility since the day we joined the council. It's what humans do. We prepare." Admiral Chen's voice drew their attention back to the main display. "Sarah, we've located the active hunting operations. 3 fleets attacking civilian populations, 2 human colonies, 1 Deltari settlement." "The Deltari are under our protection too," Sarah said immediately. "They trade with Earth. Their children have played with human children." "Understood. All 3 operations are being terminated." The display showed real-time footage from the Yelani hunting zones. Massive ships were descending on primitive settlements, herding terrified families like livestock. The images were horrifying, but what happened next was even more shocking. Human warships appeared from nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel with perfect precision. They didn't announce themselves or demand surrender. They simply opened fire. The Yilani hunting ships were destroyed in seconds. "My God," breathed the thermal delegate. "Your weapons." "We've had 15 years to study galactic technology," Admiral Chen said matter-of-factly. "We've improved on it, significantly." More displays activated around the chamber showing human fleets arriving at Yilani worlds across multiple star systems. Not just a few ships, but hundreds. The humans had mobilized their entire military in the time it took for a single council session. "This is madness," Speaker Threnk said, his branch-like arms waving in distress. "You cannot exterminate an entire species." Sarah finally turned away from the Yilani representative, who had collapsed to the floor in terror. When she looked at the council speaker, her expression was patient but implacable. "They made that choice when they started hunting children," she said simply. "We're just implementing the consequences." Dr. Wright was monitoring the rescue operations on his tablet. "We're finding survivors on several worlds, prisoners being held for future harvesting, mostly young individuals from various species." "Get them out," Sarah ordered. "Already happening," Admiral Chen confirmed. "Rescue teams are extracting all survivors. Medical ships are standing by." The Yilani representative tried to crawl away from the platform, but Captain Rodriguez was there, blocking his path without seeming to move. "Please," he whimpered. "We can change. We can stop hunting. We can eat something else." Sarah looked down at him with the dispassionate gaze of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. "No, you can't. You've been hunting sentience for thousands of years. It's what you are, and what you are is a threat to children." She gestured to the displays showing the ongoing military operations. "Humans don't negotiate with threats to children. We eliminate them." The chamber watched in stunned silence as human ships systematically destroyed Yilani military installations, hunting fleets, and processing facilities. It wasn't a war. It was an extermination, carried out with the efficient precision of surgeons removing a cancer. "This is what we look like when someone triggers our protective instincts without warning," Sarah explained to the horrified delegates. "We tried to warn you by being peaceful. We tried to show you that we could be trusted neighbors." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. "But if you threaten our young, or anyone else's young, this is what happens. We don't get angry. We don't lose our temper. We just solve the problem." The last transmission came from Admiral Chen. "Operation complete. All Yilani military assets neutralized. All hunting operations terminated. All survivors recovered." Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Elena." "Anytime, little sister." The display went dark, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. Sarah looked back at the cowering Yilani representative. "Your species is now extinct in space. Any Yilani ships that leave your homeworld will be destroyed on sight. Your people can live out their lives on their own world, but they will never hunt again." She turned to address the entire chamber. "This has been a demonstration. We hope it won't need to be repeated." The aftermath of the demonstration settled over the Galactic Council chamber, like dust after an explosion. Delegates sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The humans had revealed themselves to be something completely different from what everyone had believed for 15 years. Sarah Chen stood calmly at the center of the platform, her hands clasped behind her back. Around the chamber, the other human delegates maintained their positions, still forming that perfect perimeter that had materialized without anyone noticing. They weren't threatening anyone, but their presence had fundamentally changed the atmosphere of the entire chamber. Speaker Threnks was the first to find his voice. "Ambassador Chen," he said carefully, "what you have just done will have consequences that reach across the entire galaxy." "Yes," Sarah agreed simply. "That was the point." The Krathan military delegate leaned forward in his chair. "Your people have just demonstrated military capabilities far beyond what anyone suspected. Why did you hide this from the council?" Dr. Wright answered without looking up from his tablet, where he was monitoring rescue operations. "We didn't hide anything. We just didn't see any reason to show off. Humans prefer to be underestimated." "But the deception," began the Velkari representative. "What deception?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Did we ever claim to be weak? Did we ever say we couldn't defend ourselves? We told you we were explorers and diplomats. We never said that was all we were." Sarah walked slowly around the platform, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. For 15 years, we've served as mediators and peacekeepers because that's what we wanted to be. We chose to be helpful rather than threatening. We chose cooperation over dominance. She paused, looking at the cowering Yilani representative who was still crouched near the holographic controls. But we never forgot what we were underneath all that diplomacy. We never stopped being the species that climbed to the top of our world's food chain through patience, cooperation, and ruthless efficiency. The Chamber's communication systems came alive with priority signals from across the galaxy. Reports were flooding in from human rescue operations, survivor accounts, and the systematic destruction of Yilani military assets. Dr. Wright looked up from his tablet with a grim expression. Final count: 1,214 survivors recovered from Yilani facilities. Various species, including 47 humans from the missing colony ships. A ripple of relief mixed with horror went through the chamber. Survivors meant that the genocide could be stopped, but it also confirmed the extent of the Yilani crimes. The survivors are being transported to medical facilities. Wright continued. Full psychological support teams are standing by. It's going to take time for them to recover from what they experienced. Sarah nodded, then turned back to address the assembled delegates. This brings us to the question of what happens next. The chamber fell silent again, waiting. Humanity has just demonstrated something that we hoped we would never have to show you, Sarah said. We are capable of eliminating threats to innocent life with extreme efficiency. We can track down enemies across the galaxy. We can coordinate military operations on a scale that would make most species dizzy. She walked to the edge of the platform, closer to the watching delegates. But here's what you need to understand. We don't want to be the galaxy's police force. We don't want to rule anyone. We don't want to conquer or control or dominate. We want exactly what we've always wanted: to explore, to learn, to help where we can. The Zephyrian delegate who had mocked humanity earlier raised one clawed hand tentatively. Then why reveal your true capabilities now? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Because someone was hunting children. Not just human children, any children. When we see a threat to the young and innocent, we can't ignore it. It's literally impossible for us. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Think of it this way. Humans are like guard dogs. Most of the time we're friendly and helpful and happy to play with everyone. But if you threaten the people we're protecting, we become something very different. And who exactly are you protecting? Asked the massive Thranx. Sarah spread her arms to encompass the entire chamber. Everyone. Every species that chooses peace over predation. Every civilization that protects its young instead of hunting others. Every world that wants to grow and learn and explore instead of consuming its neighbors. Dr. Wright had received another update on his tablet. Admiral Chen reports that all Yilani space-based infrastructure has been destroyed or captured. Their homeworld is under surveillance. Any attempt to resume hunting operations will be met with immediate response. What about their planet itself? Asked the thermal delegate nervously. Will you destroy their world? Sarah looked genuinely surprised by the question. Of course not. We're not genocidal maniacs. The Yilani can live peaceful lives on their homeworld for as long as they want. They just can't hunt other species anymore. She turned to look at the alien who had started this entire crisis. Your people will have to learn to eat plants or non-sentient animals. It might be difficult at first, but you'll adapt. Most species do. The Yilani representative looked up at her with terrified eyes. You would let us live? As long as you never hunt sentient beings again, yes. Humans don't kill for pleasure or revenge. We kill to protect. Once the threat is eliminated, we have no reason to continue. Speaker Thranx leaned back in his massive chair, his golden bark creaking. This changes everything. The balance of power in the galaxy, the nature of the council itself. No, Sarah said firmly. It doesn't change anything. Humans are still the same species you've known for 15 years. We're still explorers and diplomats and mediators. We still want to help build a peaceful galaxy where all species can thrive. She gestured to the other humans around the chamber. We're just also the species that will hunt down and eliminate anyone who threatens that peace. The Velkari delegate's silver eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and amazement. How many other capabilities have you kept hidden? Captain Rodriguez smiled slightly. Enough. Let's just say that if anyone else decides to start hunting children, they'll discover that humanity has been preparing for a lot more than just diplomatic negotiations. Dr. Wright closed his tablet and looked up at the assembled delegates. The important thing to remember is that none of this was meant as a threat to any of you. Every species in this chamber has shown respect for sentient life and protection of the young. You have nothing to fear from humanity. But species like the Yilani, began the Krathan delegate. Species like the Yilani won't exist in space anymore. Sarah said simply, "We've made that very clear." The chamber's main display activated one final time, showing a galaxy-wide map with human ships patrolling trade routes and monitoring communication channels. The scope of humanity's actual presence was staggering. They hadn't just been exploring and mediating. They had been building a comprehensive defense network that covered most of known space. "We've been Guardians for 15 years, Sarah explained. "You just never knew it because we didn't want you to feel threatened or controlled. We prefer to work in the background, preventing problems before they become crises." She looked around the chamber one last time, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of worlds. "Today was the first time we had to work in the foreground. We hope it will be the last. But if anyone else decides to hunt children, to commit genocide, to threaten the innocent," she shrugged. "Well, now you know what happens." Sarah walked back to her simple metal chair and sat down, pulling out her tablet as if nothing unusual had occurred. Around the chamber, the other humans began returning to their seats as well, that perfect perimeter dissolving as quietly as it had formed. "I believe we still have some routine trade agreements to discuss," Sarah said pleasantly to Speaker Thranks. "Shall we continue with the regular agenda?" The massive tree-like being stared at her for a long moment, then began to laugh, a sound like wind through ancient forests. "Humans," he said, shaking his great head. 15 years and we never really knew you at all." Sarah smiled, a genuinely warm expression this time. "Now you do. We're exactly what we've always been, a species that protects its young and helps its friends. We just happen to be very, very good at both." The Galactic Council session resumed, but everything had changed. The humans were still the same helpful mediators they had always been, still eager to solve problems and build bridges between species. But now everyone knew what lay beneath that peaceful exterior. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent, backed by the patience and ruthless efficiency of apex predators. And somewhere in the depths of space, Admiral Elena Chen's ships continued their silent patrol, watching and waiting for the next threat to emerge. Because humans never stopped being what they were: guardians of the young, protectors of the innocent and the most dangerous species in the galaxy, to anyone foolish enough to hunt children.